real quick, I'm sorry. Are you guys seeing the EditorX page?
We're seeing the AIGA LinkedIn page.
Okay, thank you. Let me just fix that. Okay, is it appearing correctly now?
Yes, now
Okay.
it is.
Okay, all right, I'm just gonna get it started.
Hello and welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. We're gonna give folks a few seconds to join us here on Zoom and on our live streams on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, and then we'll kick things off officially. All right, looks like people are joining the stream now, joining the Zoom room. So I will kick things off and people will join us as they can. Hello and welcome to Rethinking How Web Design Teams Work Together, a talk and panel event all about collaboration in web design. My name is Li-Shan Huang, Design Education Manager here at AIGA, the Professional Association for Design. I'll introduce our speakers in just a moment, but I wanted to first stop and thank our partners at EditorX for collaborating with us on this event. EditorX is a fully collaborative web creation platform built for designers and agencies. We'll start with a talk from experts at the EditorX in-house agency about best practices and lessons learned when it comes to working as a team and creating websites for others. We'll cover things like workflows, collaborating with clients, working together during the design process, how to do quality assurance, and then handing off our final work. And then stay tuned for our panel discussion where we'll welcome EditorX's product lead and Florence Brown of FLSY Studio to talk about how collaboration can help with scaling a web business. Now I'll go ahead and introduce you to the guest experts for this session. Today, you'll hear from two people from the in-house agency at EditorX. The first expert is Roee Kuperberg. He is the project manager team lead based in Tel Aviv. And for the last 7 years, he has built teams and processes that made his company successful. First in the online video advertising scene, and now in the world of web design. When he's not at work, you can find him hitting the slopes on his snowboard. Next up, we have Nofar Daskal, who is a designer at the EditorX agency team, also based in Tel Aviv. She is a designer and illustrator who has worked for national magazines and top design agencies. She previously had her own design studio specializing in branding, art, culture, and education projects. In her spare time, Nofar likes to shake things up as an amateur mixologist. Third on the docket today is Naama Ben Oliel Ronen, who leads the team of product managers behind EditorX. She's a seasoned product management leader with more than 15 years of experience in ideation, development, and launching unique products for startups and growth stage companies. She has a passion for user experience, design, and AI. And finally, last but not least, Florence Brown, also known as Floss. After working in ads for the better part of a decade, she started up her web design business, FLSY Studio, where she collaborates on digital projects with creatives across Melbourne, Australia. She's also a co-founder and resident DJ at Primer, a monthly underground techno nightclub event and recording label that has numerous residencies as a DJ around Melbourne. So a special thanks to Florence for staying up late in Australia to join us today. So let's give a hearty welcome to our wonderful speakers. I'll turn things over to Roee and Nofar for the presentation, and I'll come back in a little bit to ask some questions of our panelists. See you in a bit.
Yeah. Hello, we are Roee and Nofar from the EditorX agency, and our day-to-day responsibility is creating websites from A to Z for influencers and brands that partners up with EditorX. This means we get to work with big names like of Barcelona, Carly Kloss, the Alfa Romeo Formula One team, Incubus Band, Mayim Bialik, Gavin Strange, Nikki Tutorials, and many others. With over 150 projects, we collected some of the key insights we think can help you take your web design business to the next level. Our team started really small, and working with such great and big names, we had to learn pretty quick how to scale up so we can deliver the best websites to our clients. Today, we are a team of 12 people. We have project managers, art directors, designers, technical designers, and a content expert. We also have developers, SEO, accessibility, and QA teams on call. As our projects become more and more challenging, we are always improving and adapting our workflow because we believe that our workflow is an ongoing process. So today we're going to talk about the 5 biggest learnings from our time as a website creation agency. First is uncover the why, which means getting to the bottom of the client's requirements. Second, don't sacrifice creativity. Nofar will talk about how we stay creative while still meeting a client brief. Third, keep the process flexible. We'll get into how we iterated a process based on what we've learned in past projects. Fourth, make the most out of technology. How we embraced changes in technology to help us work more efficiently. And fifth, give away the ending. In other words, set the expectations and make sure the client is fully aware of what happens the day after we go live. Before we even get started with planning a project, the first thing we learned to do is to work with the client to understand the why behind his requirements and needs. Clients can come to us with specific ideas, dreams, and lists of what they want. And as service providers, we want to make them very happy. But on the other hand, as website creation experts, we sometimes know that what they are asking for isn't the best solution. That's why we dig in to clarify the reasoning behind their needs. And when we fully understand what they actually need, we can come up with the best way to solve it. We start off with sending our clients a questionnaire to fill out. Before we even meet them, we ask them a lot of questions to understand their business and the experience they want to provide users on their site. Here's what it looks like. So it asks them about their business, their target audience, their website objectives, the design requirements, the user experience, and many more topics. It's a very high-level first look questionnaire to get an initial understanding of what the client is asking for. It helps us prepare the topics we want to focus on in our planning process. Once they do so, we set up a kickoff meeting where we investigate the client and make sure there's no stone left unturned and that we have answers to all of our questions. We never limit ourselves. Sometimes one intro meeting is just not enough to really uncover all the answers. We have to be ready to do a lot of digging before we get to a full detailed brief. So to give an example, we created a website for Akia Mission, a nonprofit organization focused on sending the second Israeli astronaut to space. They filled out the questionnaire, and then we set up a kickoff meeting. What they were asking for was a site with the same sitemap and structure they have here. As you can see, the homepage is a batch of dense paragraphs about the mission, which we found as less successful use of the homepage real estate. When questioning them regarding in the kickoff meeting, we understood that they have a great mission and story. And for them, it's super important to tell it well and immerse people in the story from the moment they land on the website. And that's the actual why. But writing a bunch of long paragraphs is not good storytelling in web design. We know that the best storytelling on the web uses more than just words. The new homepage we created is telling the story with less words, with more animation and different sections you can scroll through that illustrate their story. We now allow the user to do window shopping through different pieces of content he can explore when visiting the website. So we looked at what they were asking for, but then we dug deeper into why. We learned more about them and their goals, so we could take that and figure out how can we restructure and redesign the website in an optimal manner.
Yeah, that's also very true in the creative process. Even when we're getting feedback on a design and the client wants to change something, we ask them not to give us the solution. Instead, we tell us what is bothering you so we can understand why you want to change it. And then we can come up with the best solution. And this is also why part of our design process is to start with the homepage. We create 2 versions and we let the client choose from them. One that sticks to the brief, and the second one stretches the client's thinking. It's our creative interpretation of what they need. As designers in an agency, we create for others, but it's important for us to keep creativity in the work process, because staying exactly within the brief limits our creativity and doesn't always give the best solution. So by creating two designs, we meet two of our objectives. The first, like Roee mentioned, is we understand the why and we give our version of how we will solve it. And the second one is that it allows us to come up with things that have never been done before, and it lets us evolve as design professionals. And we see that in most projects, we see eventually that the client will choose the midway, combining the two. So it doesn't only keeps us inspired in our work, but also provides results. To give you an example of what I mean, we're working now on a website for Omaitachi, which are a comedy duo who are quite famous in Japan. So we started this version with the colors and other elements they asked for, but we felt that it didn't quite fit what you'd expect to see from someone in the comedy industry. And so we looked at their social media channels and we saw beginnings of a visual language with bright colors that seemed more in line with comedy. We did also our own research in Japanese design and packaging, so we showed them this second choice as well. If we didn't stay creative and imagine more than what we were asked for, we would never be able to push boundaries or come up with new solutions in design.
And once we understand the client needs and know the scope and timeline of the project, then we can start planning the rest of the process. We have a standard process for how we get a project from start to finish. But our biggest learning is that it's important to stay flexible. Our workflow is dynamic. It can change from one project to another. But there are two things that have dramatically affected our workflow. One is learning from our experience, and the second is adapting technology improvement. When it changes and improves, it can enable us to work differently. So let's start with changes based on experience. Our process for content creation has completely transformed since we first started. We used to ask clients to give us their website content first, and then create the design based on it. But we quickly realized that this process was lacking. Basing our design on the client's content was challenging, and it lowered the quality of the design we produced. We felt like we needed to have more control over the content. So we brought in our own visual and content expert. This created a new workflow, and now we're able to work the other way around. Now that we have an expert who knows what structure works, we set the layouting and wireframes, and then the client adds text and content based on the structure, on our structure. In this case, we learned from what wasn't working well and decided to improve the process, which has also meant we are producing better work.
Yes, we've learned a lot from mistakes. The second thing that changes the way we work is when technology improves. The tools and platforms that we use change all the time, and sometimes a new feature can change everything about how we work. For me, as a not so autodidact person, I make sure to exploit every learning possibility, if it's in a formal organized session or from my colleagues who I bother with questions, because adopting new technologies can completely change and improve the workflow. For example, we used to have a lot of back and forth communication between the designer and the developer about who could be in the editor and when. And when we built the Alpha Barcelona website, which required a lot of code in Velo, which is our open development tool, at the time, the project manager created a schedule so that the designer had half the day to build in the editor, and the second half of the day, the developer would go in and code. But now EditorX is fully collaborative with concurrent editing, so that multiple designers and the developer can be working all at once in the editor. And you can multiply that by the pages. For example, in Annika Izor's website, which involved a lot of editor work and writing code, the designer and the developer worked in parallel, which is much more efficient. It was less of a headache, and we didn't have to coordinate schedules. Another technological capability that has changed tremendously for me since I joined the EditorX is that now I don't only design the site, I also build it, which is why I had to adapt and absorb some new workflows into my work. The QA process, for example, looks different than what I was used to, and it had moved from the developer's world into the design world. for me and most designers, you used to design in another tool and then hand it over to the developer. Once he had finished, you would check that the design looks exactly as it should and that everything works. But now I'm the one who's building it, so it's my responsibility to keep things in mind like accessibility and SEO, even when I start designing. And I check those things as I go. After I've built one page, I check things like alt text, page descriptions, and headings for SEO. And when I'm finished, I check everything one final time. And now we can even manage the whole communication side of the QA process inside the editor because of live comments on EditorX. There's no need for an extra tool because you can comment right on the canvas on specific breakpoints or elements.
Finally, when a project wraps up, we hand over to the website to the client. Our final lesson is that handover goes smoothly when we set expectations in the very first meeting and maintain it along the process. We make sure it's clear that our team won't be doing maintenance after the website goes live, and that we structure the website in a way it would be easy to update textual and visual content. That way, the client knows we aren't doing maintenance, and we can teach them what they will need to be able to edit the site while still protecting the design. With the new roles and permissions feature on EditorX, this becomes much more easier for us. We set the client's roles and permissions based on the editing capabilities they will need after we hand the site over. We decide whether they can only change content or edit structure, and we can drill down to set permissions on a specific page or pages. We can provide them with dashboard permissions only that will allow them to edit content without even entering the editor. But overall, we want to keep the design protected and not give any kind of permission other than what the client really needs. So for example, here's the different roles on the Rakia website. Here are the roles for our team members while we were working on the project. We have 2 team members who have developer access. But when we hand it over to Rakia, they have a content manager who can access the CMS and a blog manager who will only have blog capabilities. The admin can rest assured that he will always be able to add a designer or other roles if he needs to redesign or add capabilities to the website. Because after all of this hard work we put in, we want to keep the design intact.
Yeah, that especially gives us peace of mind as designers, because by the time we're done, we feel overprotective and we never want to give them back.
Don't forget, Nofar, by the end of the day, it's not our website. So to summarize, we put lots of emphasis on deeply understanding their needs. We talked about how we leave room for creativity in the process. This is how we push boundaries and keep our work at a top level. We've built a flexible process that can change and improve over time and as technology evolves. And we hand over our work after we've set clear expectations with the client. Thank you for listening. We hope you've gotten some insights and learned a few useful things that can apply to your own work. We'd like to welcome back Lishon, who's going to host the panel.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nofar and Roee, for that presentation. I'm going to kick things off with the panel with a few questions that we've prepared. And I see that there's some great questions trickling in the Q&A pod here on Zoom. I also want to welcome our viewers on our LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook feeds. If you want to type in the comments with your questions, we'll also get to as many as we can, time permitting. But first, we'll kick things off with some questions for Florence, who I introduced earlier. Florence, we'd love to hear a little bit more about you and your story. How did you get started with EditorX and web design in general?
Hi, Lishon. Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure to be a part of the panel. I guess my story is a bit of a different one in that, like you mentioned in your intro, I've been working in advertising for a long time, but more on the project management side of things as a digital producer. And my kind of design journey started designing like flyers for raves and techno parties around Melbourne. And from that, I kind of got into the DJ scene and started a blog as well for a DJ collective. And I built a website for that. And I guess, yeah, word started to get around that I knew how to build websites. And I ended up building a few more for some mates, like record labels and stuff. And yeah, it kind of threw me in the direction to take a look at EditorX when it popped up. And yeah, I ended up starting my own little design studio and have used EditorX for every website that I've built so far. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, audio problem. Could you tell us about the learning curve for you, because you were coming from advertising and then got into design through this? What was the learning curve like to learn web design in EditorX?
Yeah, it was a pretty steep one for me. I never really had any training on design or development or anything like that. So it was all a very like self-taught process. But using like the templates and all of the like pre-designed modules at the start was so helpful, and such a good way to like just jump in and learn how to do it. And just like knowing that there was versioning and stuff like that, it meant that I could, you know, stuff around with these pre-made templates as much as I needed to, and I could always go back to, you know, wherever I needed to if I made a mistake. So it was a lot of trial and error at the start, and a lot of getting used to things like the breakpoints across desktop, tablet, and mobile, and having to, you know, take into account how things move around across those three things. So yeah, there was a lot to it. It was a lot to learn, you know, in these two side panels. There was like all these different terminologies and stuff that I didn't know. But having the knowledge base there was so good. Like I could literally just Google any question that I had. And even if I couldn't find it in the knowledge base, the chat system on the EditorX site, you can chat with an agent to like help you with any question. And it's pretty much instantaneous. You can just ask an agent and they'll like help you with any question. So yeah, it was a lot of trial and error, but there was a lot of support there. So it was a lot to learn, but it was a good learning process.
Very cool. It's so great to hear that there's support that's just readily available for you, whether you're just searching for it or talking to a person when you need to. So for any creative professional, there's a lot of just confidence that we need to be ready to put our stuff out in the world, whether it's our own work for clients. How did you know that you were ready to put your web design work out in the world, since you had this learning curve and you were kind of transitioning from what you were doing before to what you're doing now?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's still something that's definitely just an ongoing process. I think anyone that's creative can relate to feeling like self-conscious about anything that you really put out in the world creatively, whether that's like a website or a drawing or like, you know, some music or whatever your creativity is. So yeah, it's an ongoing thing, and it's still something that, you know, I have, you know, imposter syndrome pop up sometimes, being like, oh, wait a second, I'm actually really doing, you know, this properly now. I've had like, you know, over 20 website builds now in the platform. So yeah, I don't know if there was like a moment, maybe like after my 5th or 6th client, it started to become a bit more real for me. It made me realize that I could actually do, you know, my own studio. But yeah, it's an ongoing thing, learning that this is real and I can do it, you know?
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that story of your journey. I think it's always a constant process of reiteration, right? There's never the final destination. There's always the next thing.
Yeah,
I'd like to turn it
definitely.
over to Naama next, who leads the team of product managers behind EditorX. And I'd love to hear more about your product research process. How did you develop these EditorX tools?
So hi, everyone, and thank you for the question. I'll talk about the research we did for our collaboration offering, and I'll relate to 3 aspects. So first, as we target professional users and agencies in particular, we looked into how EditorX can scale up their work and make the agency client workflow more efficient. We talk to many of our users and identify the friction points in the workflow as it is today, realizing how linear it is, designing page by page, then content, then code, and we wanted to disrupt it and redefine it in a way that will allow agencies to deliver much faster. Secondly, we looked at collaboration-based applications. There are so many out there, the Google Suite, Figma, and others, realizing that we don't want to reinvent the wheel and we want to create an intuitive experience. And we also took a product decision to interrupt and limit as little as possible throughout the collaborative editing work. And lastly, we also looked at how EditorX can make the agency work more manageable, transparent, and the engagement between the agency members more interactive and actionable.
Thank you. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you're translating some of this research into specific features. It's great to hear that about your design values and principles. So could you give us an example maybe of how some research translated into a feature?
Sure. So if we look at our collaboration offering, we have several modules. The collaborative editing, which allows multiple users to work simultaneously on the same site, page, and even element. That's the basic foundation that enables everything. We have another module that relates to the presence, the avatars, and the indication on stage and the overall experience. We have comments, which allows users to communicate inside the editor, attaching comments to elements, mentioning their peers, and even setting a comment to a specific breakpoint. We have roles and permissions and team management. We basically invested a lot in defining granular editing permissions that allows customizing almost any role our users want, from SEO expert, content editor, developer, and of course, pro designers, which can then be assigned to team members or site contributor. We have another module relates to page editing permissions. Roee mentioned it before, basically allowing owners to control who can edit which page, no matter which role they hold. And lastly, we also have the libraries, which account for colors, typography, design assets, which can be shared across account members and site. So we took all the learning that we had from the research and translated them into this module that address all these business objectives that I mentioned before.
Wonderful. Next up, I wanted to ask about the in-house agency model at EditorX, but before that, I just wanted to acknowledge the great audience questions that are trickling in. We will get to those shortly. And we also saw the request for the client questionnaire, so that's something we can follow up with over email for attendees. And there's also stay tuned for a coupon code for attendees to try out the EditorX tools. So this is for Naama or for Roee. Tell us more about this in-house agency model and how this works into your process, because you have this in-house agency within essentially a product business. So love to hear more about that.
Okay, so I'll start here. So basically, it's a huge privilege to have a professional design agency in-house that actually represent our target audience. Allows us to basically observe their work, processes, learning their needs, collecting requirements directly from the agency, allowing product managers to get feedback throughout the product process from the agency, and also letting them try the product first. I'd like to give an example, a recent one. So we're now enhancing the grid experience on stage, and we created 2 prototypes that represent totally different experience. And we let the agency try these prototypes, and they basically selected the one that they found more intuitive. So that's just an example from last week, I think. That's it.
On my end, it's so fun, like as a user, that you get stuck on something and you can just knock on their door and ask for help, and you see things get improved based on your feedback directly. I think it's a dream for any user, like that you'd be able to fix something that you're encountering as a user in a day or in a week. That's a huge privilege on our end. And we feel the impact. We really feel the impact, and we are proud to be part of the improvement of EditorX.
Wonderful. I think this is actually a good time to weave in an audience question that pertains to EditorX and how your team collaborates. Jessica wants to know, according to your team's LinkedIn profiles, it seems that you are separated by a lot of distance, being in different parts of the world. So how does the EditorX team collaborate dealing with this distance? Is everything kind of virtual right now, or how does that work?
Is that for Naama or for me? I'm sorry.
For either of you.
I can start and it'll complement. So yeah, we have developers in different sites in the world, and I'm myself located in the UK, others located in Tel Aviv, in Kiev, and others. And the work is done online with all the collaboration-based applications that we're all familiar with, and also inside the office in Tel Aviv, they work over there. So it goes smoothly.
Yeah, I totally agree with Naama. It goes smoothly. We are very used to it. Our team is worldwide from when it started this way. We have a team in Kiev and we have a team in Tel Aviv. So yeah, we are used to it and it works really well.
Wonderful. So kind of combining that talk about your process, how your team's working across distance, what is the greatest value of EditorX's collaboration features in your eyes? What sets that apart?
That's a great question. If I need to pick one, then I'll definitely go for scaling up the agency business by shortening their site creation time and letting them work in a more manageable and efficient way. At the end of the day, our goal is to let the agency focus on the actual creation and put aside other things like time management, you know, who works when and on each page. We know that agencies are struggling with that a lot. So that's from my side.
Roee, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that Naama summarized it perfectly.
Wonderful. So this is something that I've heard more and more just from people outside of the industry, people who wanted to set up their own websites, and they see how tools like EditorX are getting simpler for people without design or tech training to use. And so how do you respond to comments or questions from potential clients that say like, oh, well, if all you're doing is dragging and dropping, do I even need to work with a designer? How do you talk about the value of having professional design help, even if the actual interfaces are getting more accessible?
So we're on a mission to remove repetitive work from both designers and coders. We let our users use smart CSS without the need of coders. And this doesn't mean that designers are, you know, redundant. It just gives them the focus to do their actual creative work. And I think it's quite similar to the no-code trend that, you know, didn't make developers unnecessary, but on the contrary, allowed them and gave them the capacity and the space to focus on more deep and interesting development matters.
Wonderful. Florence, is that something that you've come up with for potential clients, folks who've like, oh, well, you're just dragging and dropping? How do you talk about the value of what you do in those situations?
Yeah. I mean, on the surface, if you do log into the editor, it does kind of look like something that anyone could use when you see some of the like pre-designed modules that you can drag and drop, and the fact that you can just, double click in some text to update that. You can click on a gallery and it pops up with all the prompts to be able to update it. So, you know, to a point, it is pretty easy to use, but when it comes to like making sure that everything's working across the 3 breakpoints and just having a good user experience on a website is definitely something that comes with a lot of learning and experience. So all of my clients definitely see the value in that. And even just some of the, you know, tricky back-end stuff of connecting your domain and all of that sort of stuff. Yeah, my clients have definitely seen value in having an actual designer and a producer to do that side of things.
Wonderful. Yeah, we'll talk about in a bit. I have some questions about your design team structures and how you structure creative teams, but just wanted to turn back to Naama briefly and ask about, is there anything you could preview about what's coming up ahead in terms of new features and functionality?
So as we recently rolled out our collaboration offering in a gradual way, we're now focusing on investing time in user voice, talking to our users, collecting their feedback, tuning the experiences and products much further. In addition to that, we're working on new innovative features that will simplify teamwork and also make the engagement between the users more interactive. But I'd like to keep it as a surprise for our users.
Yeah, look forward to that surprise. Well, let's pivot a little bit and talk more about the collaboration between creatives on teams and how we structure that. So I'll turn it back to Florence about that. So FLSY Studio, which you founded, is actually a creative collective. Can you tell us more about that model of how you've built a team through this collective model?
Yeah, sure. So I actually started at the studio during one of the first lockdowns that we had here in Melbourne. And my idea, I know so many creatives here in Melbourne that do all these different sort of fields. And my idea at the start was to just go out to all of my friends that do like 3D modeling and make music and, know how to do social strategy and all of this sort of stuff. So I went out to my kind of creative network and I explained to them that I was building websites, but I wanted this studio to be a little bit more of a full stack kind of offering. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I've got this kind of collection of mates that are all part of the studio, and we're all still sole traders and we're all our own bosses still. But yeah, we can all rely on each other to kind of take on work that we couldn't necessarily take on if it was just ourselves doing it. So yeah, we've all collaborated on a few projects together, and from that as well, like sometimes we'll just refer each other clients if it's just a purely like photography gig, or if it's just a music production gig or something like that. But yeah, we've all got this good little collective network going on now.
And how did you come to decide to go for this collective model versus maybe kind of building a traditional agency with everybody under one roof?
Yeah, I mean, well, the lockdown was definitely a big part in it because we couldn't, all get an office together, even if we wanted to, because we're all had to stay on stay-at-home orders. But it's just, a really good model for us wanting to stay as our own independent people, being our own bosses still. And yeah, we can essentially now say we've got an agency without having to pay any of the overheads of having an office or payroll or all the stuff that, makes having a brick and mortar pretty real. So yeah, we get a lot of benefits out of it with a lot less overheads.
Wonderful. Also, for my final prepared question, it's for you, Florence, but also for Roee, if he has thoughts, but just in this general state of things, right? Both in terms of remote collaboration really being pushed or being the default during the pandemic, but also as digital tools become more intuitive and accessible. Just in general, do you have thoughts to share about how you structure creative teams and this division of labor and expertise, which I think has been changing a lot in the last few years, but do you have any thoughts about the current trends and how you're thinking about this with your teams going forward?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's something that is it's something that we have to think about and evolve with. Melbourne's had a lockdown going on for longer than anywhere in the world, pretty much. So we're learning about the best ways that we can work together, and it's been a lot of Zoom and all of these collaborative tools that are popping up now on EditorX, like being able to have someone go in and send a chat message to a certain, module that you're working on and give feedback that way is a really helpful way from a design point of getting feedback from clients. And just all being able to be in the editor at once and bounce ideas off each other and look at it at once has been a really helpful way to get the websites out there. So yeah, it's been really helpful, but there's definitely, challenges in being so separate. But yeah, it's the new normal.
I totally
Roee, do you
agree
have
with
any thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree with Florence. It's an ongoing challenge we always face, but on our here in our team, it's been an ongoing challenge even before the COVID-19 era, just because our team is multinational. So we got used to it, and we see it as a fun thing. Like we got used to it, and we've been always doing video chats every morning and meeting everyone and saying good morning with our coffee and planning the day together. So for us, we're pretty used to it, and we find it pretty fun. And now with the flexible times we are faced with, and working with home and working in the office, and so you don't have any other way. We're just collaborating with it and doing our best, and it works out for us. We're trying to enjoy it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for the conversation so far. I wanted to turn it over to these amazing audience questions. We'll see how many we can get through. I'm seeing some about just dealing with conflict, whether with clients or within your creative team. So the first one, also from Jessica, and maybe we'll start with Roee with this one, and then anybody else can chime in. Have your ideas ever clashed with your clients, and how do you handle that?
They always clash. Let's start with that. Clash. No, I'm joking. They don't really always clash, but yeah, we experience a lot of clashes. I think that, again, as part of our presentation was setting the expectations. So we talked about what happens the day after, but it's not only that. Setting the expectations is much more important, or also important in a way of how the process is going to be going on both ends. What is the responsibility of each side? So trying to uncover or make the uncertainty redundant, that really helps, making sure that the client understands what is going to happen in each step. But when it comes to design, that's something you can always debate on. So you can do something that your design team finds the best design ever, and then you show it to the client, and he says, "Listen, I can relate to it." It doesn't happen that a lot. And as Nofar mentioned in our presentation, we always do two designs. One is very close to the brief. So we try to think of, or to get into the client's head and try to nail his imagine and want. But on the other hand, we're trying to stretch the limits with our design. And usually it's the middle way. And that's great, because that's every time it proves the concept. It proves the need for those two designs, because he really likes what he wanted, but he also gets new ideas he would never think of from our design. So that's another way to handle these clashes and try to take it to lower the amount of it.
Nofar or Florence, anything to add about dealing with client clashes?
Yeah, I'm pretty fast and loose with my clients, and I bring them in really early to sort of show them early ideas, just to make sure we're on the same page from the start. And once again, going back to the collaboration of the website and the fact that I literally just start building the website straight away. I don't do any designs in any other software and then duplicate into the site. I'm just going straight into the build in EditorX. So yeah, I just bring them in really early on the process and show them how things work. And I think that them feeling like they're part of the process really helps them feel included and not have any nasty surprises towards the end of, multiple hours of working. So yeah, you're not always going to be on the exact same page from the start, but it helps to like show them what you're doing throughout the process.
Got it. There's a question from Julia, which I think is related to this. It's almost the other end of the spectrum. How do you deal with clients who don't have an idea of what they want, and how do you handle that?
Another good question. Yeah, I've had a client who didn't even know what she wanted to call her brand. So we even had to come up with a name for that together. But it can be even more fun, I think, when the client's not too sure, because it shows that they, trust your previous work and what you're doing. And yeah, just getting them involved once again is a good way to sort of help them realize what it is that they want. They don't think they know what they want, but once you start to move in the right direction, then yeah, they can work it out with you together.
Wonderful.
I agree with Florence, and many times it's the most fun projects because we can like free our minds and do the craziest things because we didn't get a very closed brief.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes not having a very specific brief actually gives everyone the chance to be more creative and branch out. We have a couple questions that are related to EditorX itself and the workflow there. The first one is an anonymous question about handoff. Nofar and Roee, you had mentioned in the presentation that you communicate with your clients, you're not necessarily doing maintenance once you hand things over, but how do you handle some of the things like ongoing costs with the domain registration or the EditorX account, the font licenses, things like that, where the client is paying going forward? Like, what are the logistics of that kind of handoff?
I think our team is a bit different on that end, just because we're partnering between EditorX and this. Usually it's a big brand or a big influencer. So it's a bit different. Usually the payment side of it is part of an agreement between the marketing department, etc. I won't get into too much details, but we do make sure that he owns everything. So if we purchase fonts for him or purchase a domain and the premium plans, etc., we make sure he has an account that he owns in every platform, internal and external. And in the end, we make sure that he has all of the capability to manage his own website from all aspects, and we don't go anywhere. We're here to support him. If he has any issues, if he needs support, we're here to be there for him.
Florence, how about you? How do you handle the client handoff when there's these ongoing expenses that need to be transferred over to the client side?
Yeah, it's really good in the back end with EditorX. There's a bunch of different permission levels that you can set. So I'll often give them enough kind of leeway that they can update their own copy on the website, update galleries and things like that, just while making sure they're not going to break the template or anything along those lines. But yeah, I usually just let them set up the like membership purchases themselves. That way they can like claim all of that stuff on tax themselves as well. But yeah, I kind of make sure I show them how to use the back end as well. It's actually a super easy interface for a lot of my clients, even the less technically savvy ones. So yeah, the handoff process is always pretty easy, and I always remain as a admin of the site as well, just for any maintenance or changes that need to happen down the track.
Got it. Do you do like a tutorial or walkthrough to teach your clients how to do this, or how do you handle that? Yeah,
I usually just do a screen share over Zoom and yeah, just take them through. It's really self-explanatory in the dashboard. But yeah, usually just a quick tutorial, and it's a bit of an ongoing thing. Whilst I'm showing them how I'm building the website, I'm showing them, how the shop works or how the blog works or whatever part it is that they're going to be using. So yeah, usually just a screen share does the trick.
Wonderful. We have a really interesting question from Michael in the Q&A. He wants to know, do you have recommendations or suggestions of things not to do with EditorX? So things to avoid in the design workflow using EditorX. I think that's for any of you.
Not really. I mean, yeah, it's a really fun platform. You can do anything in it. Like, I mean, even some of the sites that I've built kind of go against some like UX, design advice, just because, I'm working for some pretty creative clients, and we like to prioritize fun and creativity over like having a perfectly user-friendly site, even though we do make it sure it's really user-friendly as well. But yeah, you can get really cool and kooky and creative with it. So I can't really think of anything I would say don't do in it.
I appreciate you trying to make the internet a little weird and kooky again, back to having grown up during the glory days of like people's GeoCity sites and like weird MySpace kind of things. It's like great to have a little bit of, branching out a little bit when you can, when it's appropriate.
Yeah.
Anybody else have things to avoid? All right. Well, if not, there's a final question for Florence, and then I'll open it up for maybe some final thoughts, and we'll wrap up. Uzoma wants to know, Florence, have you ever had any issues with members of the collective? Like if somebody doesn't deliver, how do you deal with that? Especially since they're not technically your employees, you're not under the same umbrella.
Yeah, it has come up. I think especially because of, the global pandemic that's going on. But that's when you have to get your suit on and just explain to client that, sometimes things might take a little bit longer. But also like, I think, having this collective means that you can count on someone else when someone's unavailable or taking a little bit longer. And yeah, you can kind of find ways to deliver the project without all the bells and whistles. I've done that a few times. Like if I was waiting on a really cool 3D render, for instance, that we were going to pop on the homepage. If that was going to take a little bit longer than when we needed to launch their store, for instance, we could come up with maybe doing a background video or something like that. And then, yeah, doing like a new little announcement that, our cool quirky 3D elements are now on the site, and we could arrange that to go with a new product drop. So yeah, it is a bit more challenging when people have their own projects as well, and you can't all constantly be aligned on the same timeline. But it's still worthwhile, having a collective like that. And yeah, being able to rely on each other, has been good, but you just have to rethink it sometimes when it comes to your timelines.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. So we have about 5 minutes left. So I just wanted to open it up to all the panelists if you had any final thoughts that you wanted to share, and if you wanted to also let people know where they can follow you or find you online and your work. Why don't we start with Naama this time?
So I wanted to add something that I didn't mention before. First of all, that the team management and the collaboration offer that that I presented before is part of the general package. It doesn't require any special upgrade or anything. So we invite everyone to use these features and share with us their feedback and feature requests. And if something doesn't work or you want them to work differently, we really look forward to getting your comments and we will relate to it. You can write to us to hi@editorx.com, and we'll be super happy to get your feedback, and we'll assist as much as we can.
Wonderful. Thanks, Naama. Why don't I turn it over to Nofar and Roee next, and we'll wrap up with Florence.
No, I think first of all, it was a pleasure taking part in this panel. I really hope we gave you some interesting insights and learnings. And we can say from our point of view that EditorX is an ongoing, and we see it from the day one, from alpha, and the jumps it has is mind-blowing. In the past, I think, year and a half, we've seen it all. We went from the first bugs in the alpha version to the 99% perfect product we have today, and it's gonna be even better and better. Like Naama says, there's a lot of surprises coming. So yeah, we are very excited about what's to come, and we think it's an amazing product. We are really, it changed our lives as an agency, I must say. Like we've been working with different things before, and we're really happy that it came to our life, because we see it differently now, and we have the design freedom to do whatever we want, and that's amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me today. And yeah, big ups to EditorX, because I have been using it since it started out as a beta product. And EditorX came to me and have provided support for my little agency that I've been doing for ages now. So thank you, Shiri and Naama and everyone who's helped me out. And yeah, giving me all the support and seeing all the cool new updates that are getting released in the platform week after week. And I would recommend to anyone that is a designer or a UX designer or a developer to just jump in there and like have a look at the templates and like just start building websites, because once you get the hang of it, it is just the best platform. I've used a bunch of different ones, and it's the best, easiest, best looking, funnest platform to build websites in. So give it a whirl.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to everybody on the panel, Nofar, Roee for the presentation earlier, Naama and Florence as well, especially to Florence, who's stayed up till almost 2 a.m. Melbourne time to join us today to accommodate all of this global time zones. Thank you to everybody watching on our live streams on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, and for the folks here, of course, on Zoom. We'll be following up with all attendees in an email. If you signed up, registered, you'll get a coupon code to test out EditorX for yourself, see for yourself how it works, and we'll follow up with some things like the requests for the questionnaire and templates and all of that. And just to reiterate, you can get in touch with the EditorX team directly at hi@editorx.com. They'd love your feedback. And so that's all for me. I'm Lishan Huang from AIGA. Hope to see you at our next webinar or event. Have a good one. Take care.